everyone. On behalf of the Irvington PTSA and the League of Women Voters of the Rivertowns, welcome to our candidate panel. I'm Chris Paul, one of the co-presidents of the Irvington PTSA, and it's my great pleasure to present Lynn Levine and Jody Reaver from the League of Women Voters of the Rivertowns. Lynn is the president, and Jody is the director and coordinator of voter services. And I'm very, very glad that they're here, because then I can just sit down and watch, because they're gonna do the heavy lifting tonight. It is also my great pleasure to present the candidates for the 2 open seats on our Board of Education: John Dawson, Brian Friedman, Maura Gedid, and Della Lenz. The special election is on Tuesday, July 11th, 2 weeks from today. Please go and vote. Get everybody in your house to go and vote. If you are not registered, the deadline for registering is Thursday, July 6th. Please do that at the district office at the Dow's Lane Elementary School. And then if you will not be in Irvington, if you'll be away on July 11th, please fill out an absentee ballot application so that you can vote even if you're not here. I think that's it on the election. I will also invite Michael Hanna, our Vice President of the Board of Education, to say a few words to us tonight. Michael?
Thank you. So I also want to thank the League of Women Voters of the Rivertowns and the Irvington PTSA for hosting this discussion and opportunity to meet the candidates. Welcome candidates for the Irvington Union Free School District. I look forward to serving with 2 of you after this election, and this is a chance for all of us to make get informed to make that decision. I wanted just to share briefly from the New York State School Board Association their recommended characteristics of a board member. They start with: an effective communicator, can describe what he or she wants and describes what others want; a good listener; a consensus builder, capable of working toward decisions that all can support and willing to compromise to achieve goals; community participant, enjoys meeting a variety of people, can identify the community key communicators and reaches out to the community; decision maker, is comfortable making decisions and can support group decision making; information processor, can organize priorities and schedules to handle large amounts of verbal and written information; a leader, willing to take risks and be supportive of board colleagues, district staff, and community; team player, helps promote the board's vision and goals. I look forward to this discussion. I'm confident that all present will treat each other with courtesy. This isn't an environment for gotchas. This is a chance for the audience to get to know you. We're a small, close-knit community, and I want to thank you as prospective school board members for being willing to take on the challenges and joys of supporting the academic achievement and the well-being of our 1,750 students approximately, our several hundred faculty and staff, and our community. So, good luck.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate that you're coming out. It is being videotaped, and it will be available for you to watch at a future time as well. Now I'm going to pass it over to the League of Women Voters of the Rivertowns representatives for them to start the panel.
Should I use this? Good evening. First, before we start this process and before I read out the rules, I'd like to stress that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan community organization and that we strive to be as neutral as possible. So stating that we do not support one candidate over another. I'll go straight into the rules then. And the rules are, except for the first question, which the PTSA has submitted, and the candidates were given ahead of time. I will randomly select a question to ask from those submitted by the community from the sand bucket. The number of questions asked will depend on the time remaining for the panel. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions. We will time the answers and hold up paddles so people know how much time is left. We will move down the line and giving each candidate a chance to be the first as we progress through the questions. Questions will not be accepted from the floor, and this candidate panel is videotaped and available for viewing. Before we start with the questions, each candidate has 2 minutes to deliver a statement. And before this, as each candidate walked in, they were able to select a number from the sand bucket, which determined the order in which they would be answering these questions and giving their statement. So having said that, are there any questions? No. Okay, so we will start then with the 2-minute statements, and we'll start with you, Mr. Dawson.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is John Dawson, as you can all see. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for helping to put this together, but especially thank the PTSA. At this time of the year, at such short notice, putting this together was just outstanding. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Mr. Hanna. I thought that you were describing the characteristics of a teacher. I have been in education for over 35 years. I presently teach in Yonkers at Roosevelt High School. I teach U.S. history. On several occasions, I have run for one office or another, one of them being the school board of Irvington, in which I was elected, and was on the board for 3 years, serving as president twice. We accomplished a lot when I was on the board, not because of me, because we had a great board and things were just in the right place at the right time. We had all of the union contracts were ratified while we were on the board. We had all the plans for the fields in the works. They were starting the early stages, by all means, of course. We had many discussions about it. We tried to go back to the way things had been under Mr. Richard Hayek, who had been a superintendent / high school principal in order to save money for the district. But it was a man who thought of the school community as family. And one of the reasons that I'm running, I think we've gotten away from that a little bit. And respect for everybody in the district is important, and especially for the students. And that's what I'm hoping that I can bring back if you elect me.
Mr. Friedman.
Good evening. Again, thank you to the PTSA and the League of Women Voters for organizing tonight. Thank you to the candidates as well for participating on short notice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Friedman. I'm a 1992 graduate of Irvington High School, and my 2 children are currently in the schools. I have a daughter who will be in 2nd grade next year, and another one who will be starting middle school in 6th grade. Also, some of you may know my mom, Fran Friedman, who was a longtime teacher and substitute in the district for many years. And while I was growing up and going through school, she was very active in the PTSA and involved in the community. And I saw firsthand how her efforts made the schools and the community better. And I grew up in that culture of volunteering and would be honored to serve on the school board in order to try to give back to my community where I grew up and now have decided to come back and raise my own children. As a lawyer, I believe that my analytical and problem-solving skills would be an asset to the board. I'm inquisitive. I look at all sides of the issues before making a decision or recommendation, and I look to try to build a consensus in any decision that I'm a part of. As a board member, I will listen to the needs and desires of the community and collaborate with my board colleagues and the administration to ensure that we deliver the best education possible for all students. Above all, that's my goal. My goal is that the children in the district of every age and every ability get the best education while working within the fiscal constraints that we as a district have and know all too well. I look forward to a lively discussion tonight and for everyone to get to know all of us to be able to make a better decision on July 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes.
So thank you again to those who organized tonight and to those of you who came out, who cared enough to be here to get to know us. So my name is Mara Geddes, and I too am seeking a seat on the Board of Education for Irvington. My husband and I found this village 6 years ago, brought our children here, and are very pleased to be raising them here. I have a second grader going into third grade and a kindergartner going into first grade. So my husband grew up in a town about this size. I'm a product of a strong suburban public school like this one, with strong academics, arts, and athletics. I, like Brian, feel that it's time to give back, and that in a village of this size, community means so much. I am, in my work and my training, I have an MBA and worked in investor relations for a number of years. Data-heavy, analytical work, which can aid in looking at budgets. My community service as well. Both in joining the PTSA, doing political, looking at legislative, state and federal policy and how it impacts our kids, as well as starting the walking school bus, which was a chance to get kids involved, both with exercise, community, and learning a life skill. I care a lot about serving the schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
One second,
Oh,
Ms. Lenz. Sorry, we need to reset. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lenz.
My name is Della Lenz. I want to thank the PTSA. I know the end of the year events and everything that you're responsible for, putting this on you was a tremendous task, and thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. My husband and I have been an Irvington family for about 20 years. We have raised 3 children here. I have my son Brian, who is going into 11th grade, my daughter Julia, who is going into 10th grade, and my youngest daughter Jordan, who's going into 8th grade. It's a great community and a wonderful place to raise children. And just like the other candidates have said, it's a unique place. It's how I grew up. It's all about family and working together. I have a very diverse background with a BA in psychology. I worked with special needs children and adults early in my career. I was self-taught and I transitioned into technology, and where I worked for Solomon Brothers and through the mergers with Citigroup. Over the past 2 decades, I've been a strong advocate for Irvington and its residents. We're working with many civic organizations, the PTSA, the IEF, FACE, Rivertown Heroes, School Budget Task Force, West Halp Homeless Shelter, Abbott House, Andrus, St. Barnabas Outreach Program, Presbyterian Outreach Program. My goal is to do whatever I can, it always has been, to do whatever I can to support individuals and local organizations in our community. Over the past 13 years, I've been very involved with the school and board matters. I've gained significant insight on what it takes to be a board member. I've seen great things done by the board. I actually texted them that the last board member, very happy with what has been going on, and I think that I would be an asset to the board and valuable, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so The first question tonight, so now we're moving the format. This was 2 minutes, and now we're moving to 1 minute to respond for each question. So just to clarify that. And if you don't mind just giving us a bit of time after the person, so we can reset the clock. That just helps. Thank you. So we will move to the first question, which is from the PTSA. And this is, we will start with you, Mr. Friedman, so we'll just move down. If you could please describe a formative moment in your own education.
So when I got emailed this question earlier today, my mind started going back to, now 35 or so years ago, to Dow's Lane, to then the middle school, and then the high school, thinking about all the wonderful teachers I had during my time here. And in my thought process, what really my mind stopped on was my AP American history teacher in 11th grade, Mr. Hubertus, and that experience. It was probably the first class that had college-level rigor, and where I probably worked harder in that class than any class since, in terms of the amount of reading every week, the amount of writing, and it really taught me how to process and synthesize a lot of information, write with clarity, write with purpose, and it was that class that really put me down the road to being a better student and a better writer.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Geddes.
I'm afraid I don't have the same experience at Irvington with a truly formative experience in my life, but I think that doing an MBA was a pretty formative experience in my life, because up until that time, I hadn't felt confident in making an argument using numbers, using graphs, and really telling a story using every means at my disposal. And particularly now that schools are so data-driven, there's so much more information collected on students, and administrations are expecting to really shape the teaching process through that data. I think it's especially critical to have that numerical comfort and experience in training.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz.
Sorry, there's a fly. I received the question a little bit late, so I'm going to wing it here, so I apologize. When I thought about this, it wasn't actually any one moment. It was kind of cumulative. I don't remember at what year in high school, upper levels, when it dawned on me everything that I was learning in history and sociology and my electives and all the other classes, that everything was coming together. And it made me want to learn more and more. And it's that drive to learn and drive to succeed and to make the world better and make yourself better and help everybody. And I guess that was the biggest kind of wake-up call in my educational career.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Dawson.
Thank you. I also have a difficult time finding one formative moment. My entire adult life has been spent helping others. Being a teacher, I started out teaching in Catholic school, and trust me, when you're in Catholic school, you're not doing it for money. I was on the ambulance corps in Irvington for close to 20 years. I was captain. I was on the board of directors, working regular shifts. But I think that the biggest moment, my wife knew that I always wanted to get involved more than I had just going to meetings. And when our youngest daughter got into 10th grade, she finally relented, and that was the moment that I said, okay, thank you, and I took the opportunity to run for school board, and I was elected, and I'd like to have that opportunity again.
Thank you. Okay, so I will pull the first question. This is a long question, so and I can repeat the question as I move down, just so you're aware. But and I'm reading the name of the yes. Okay, so Beth wrote a question, and Ms. Geddes, we're starting with you with this. In light of the brutally hot learning and working conditions in our school buildings, do any of the candidates have any opinions on how to provide air conditioning in all classrooms and learning spaces?
I'd be happy to look at it, Beth, but I'm not going to be able to answer that immediately. I think it's an important question as schools get pushed into the summers with their education. I know that it's an issue that has to come up periodically in the buildings and grounds discussions of our aging schools, and I hope to have a chance to answer you better soon.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, it's
No.
okay.
Okay. All right. Ms. Lenz.
I would also like to answer that. Would love to answer that. My kids would love to have an answer to that. I guess what we can do is what the state mandates is a 5-year facility plan that we have. Is that something that we include on there? Is that something that we want to work towards? Is that one of our goals? One of the jobs of the most important jobs of the board is setting goals. And it's driven by the community. So is that a goal? Is that important enough? How is it affecting the learning? If it's significantly affecting the learning, yes, it is something that we need to address. But other than that, listening to the community is most important and seeing what their goals are and being driven by that.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson, do you want me to read the question?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I agree that it is a serious problem that we have to look at, especially at this time of the year when students are taking Regents exams, when they're taking other state tests. It can get to be unreasonably disconcerting for the students, and not to mention uncomfortable. For a long time, I have been trying to get the state and our school district, especially when Dr. Harrison came in from New Jersey, to start thinking about solar panels. We have flat roofs that are exposed to the sun that could generate enough electricity to get us money in savings that could help us afford any kind of air conditioning system that we deem necessary and practical.
Thank you. And Mr. Friedman, do you want me to reread the question?
No, I'm fine, thanks. I think like everyone expressed, we'd all like to see air conditioning in the schools. I know my daughter comes home at the beginning of the school year, at the end of the school year, complaining about how hot it is in her classrooms. But again, as some of the other candidates have mentioned, this needs to be a dialogue with the larger community to see where that is as a priority in terms of our physical plant and what we want to do. I think we also need to talk to the teachers in these buildings and the administrators to see where that fits on their range of priorities. I mean, to put air conditioning in the schools obviously will have a cost, and we need to weigh that cost against the other needs of the buildings and see where our funds could be used best. I think if solar was an option, that's certainly something that should be explored and looked at, as well as other energy efficient ways to heat and cool our buildings.
Thank you. So we're starting now with you, Ms. Lenz. This question comes from Nick. American children are at a disadvantage to their European and Asian counterparts due to a de-emphasis on foreign language. Our children will live in an increasingly global world where technology and culture blend together regardless of geography. Can you please explain your position on expanding our curriculum to include early childhood foreign language immersion classes?
It'll take more than a minute. I met with the group of parents that are trying to advocate for starting early language for the children. This has been a long-standing issue, going back to my neighbors, Lily, who worked on it for her kids. It's something that's very important to our community and has historically been. There are concerns, and we have to prioritize. I'm an advocate of foreign language. I see the value in it. But we have to look at what's on the teacher's plate And we had great dialogue last night. What is on the teacher's plate? What is going to give? What is the financial cost of it? Do the teachers have enough time? What resources do they need, and what programs are available? I think that it's worth dialogue. I think that if it's driven, all the initiatives from the school should be driven by the community, and for a very long time, as long as I've been here, it has been an important issue to the community. But like I said, we need to look at it as a community as a whole and prioritize and
Thank you.
find ways to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Okay.
Yes.
This issue is interesting for me because for those of you who have high school students or have gone through Irvington High School in close to the last 40 years, you might have had my wife, Nina Caporal Dawson, who is a Spanish teacher, who has had an extraordinary success rate with students of all different levels. And in terms of an immersion program, she and I have talked about this numerous times. We're kind of boring people. We don't have a lot to do. The biggest problem that we would have implementing something like that is, as Della tried to allude to, something has to give. And let's forget about the money for right now. Let's just say we had all the money we needed. What are we taking out of the student's day now that we can replace this immersion program with? It's a fantastic idea, and if we can do it in some way, by all means, we should try.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Friedman.
Now, and I want to pick up on the question itself, which asked about an immersion program, which may be different from just general foreign language at the earlier grades. And that's something that I don't think has been talked about as much in the community as just the general nature of pushing foreign language instruction down to the lower grade levels. But as Mr. Dawson was saying, any increase in foreign language instruction at the lower level is going to mean taking something out of the schools, and that also has to be part of the discussion with the community, with the administration, and with the teachers. People are very interested in additional STEM initiatives, Project Lead the Way. Can that coexist with also the desire for increased foreign language? So we need to look at the curriculum as a whole and find out how it could fit into the curriculum, and does the community want to add foreign language if it means taking something else out of the curriculum? It has to be a dialogue that I think is ongoing now, but will need a lot more discussion.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Skedden.
Thank you, Brian, for bringing up the immersion piece of the question. Immersion is a separate and a fairly extensive change to our elementary curriculum, I believe. So I have the same questions about scheduling, cost, but further impact on the later language education as well. I think that I'm very proud to see things coming from the community, particularly from folks who have been here maybe for less time and haven't heard about the battles or are starting to learn about how many times this battle has been fought before. I'm so glad to see people are involved, and I hope that the conversation will continue at the same time with an eye to what the community consensus and what the administration believes can happen with the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Dawson, I believe we're beginning with you, correct?
Okay.
Just keep me on task in case I go out of line. This is a question from Beth. What do the candidates think about parents exercising their right to opt out of state-mandated standardized testing?
I think it's important that we demonstrate to our children that when we have belief in something, that we in this country have the ability to stand for what we believe in. Somebody opting out for the sake of opting out is one thing, but somebody opting out because of beliefs that it is harmful to children, or that the tests don't measure what they're supposed to, or many of the other issues that people who have done a lot more work in this area than I have. Just a couple of weeks ago, down at Lincoln High School, we had an ESSA meeting with the commissioner, and a woman from Ossining, who was a big proponent of this, said it a lot better than I ever could, and that's the parents who do this are doing a great service for the entire state, even those that do send their children to take the tests.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
Now, if a parent believes that they don't want their children to take the test for whatever reason, that's a parent's decision, that's a parent's right. And I don't think there's really anything that we can do or should be doing to change that. I think at the end of the day, each parent has to decide what they think is best for their children and how they want their children to deal with that issue. I know it's a very heated issue, it's a complex issue, and I think hopefully the opt-out movement has spurred more dialogue in terms of the test and what it's measuring and how it's given and whether it is a good test or a bad test. And I think that dialogue will continue throughout the years, but at the end of the day, parents have to decide what's best for their children.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
I too agree that parents have to ultimately decide what is best for their kids, and I think that the opt-out rates in New York show that parents care very deeply about the quality of the test and what it is expected to show, if it can lead to improvements. If this reaction can lead to improvements in the testing programs, I'm all for it. I think that I know the district has to walk a line as far as potential retaliation. There's been talk of potential retaliation from the state, and that is not an easy place to be. So I applaud the district for trying to straddle that line between parents' natural concern and their right to opt out and the place that they have to live within the federal and state mandates. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz?
I totally agree. It's a family's decision. The quandary is when a family has opposing decisions. My husband has a different belief than I do. I usually win, but that's okay. I understand his philosophy. I understand that it's a requirement, and there's benefit to it. There's benefit to understanding the scores. It's benefit to understanding the data, and I do think it is necessary, and it could provide essential information that would help better our schools. But in support of teachers and what's going on in the state, morally, it's hard for me to affect teachers by that one test. That's just my personal opinion, and like I said, I think it's every family's decision. But the moms usually win.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Friedman, we'll start with you. This is from Beth. Our property values are directly linked to the perceived excellence of our schools. How do the candidates react to the statement, and this is in quotes, to achieve, maintain, and improve upon excellence, we need to spend more, end quote?
Well, first I'll agree with Beth that if you just look at all the people who are moving here these days, they're coming primarily for the reason that we have a reputation as an excellent school district, and we need to continue to invest in our children's education, but that also means investing in the most cost-effective way, finding ways that we can increase programming, but in a smart, cost-effective way. It doesn't necessarily mean that you just have to throw money at it to maintain the excellence, but as a district, we need to think strategically, not just from year to year, but over a multi-year plan of what programs we want to add, how we're going to pay for them, and how we can also look to save money within the district so we can then take those savings and invest them in other programs.
Thank you. And I'd like to remind you, if anybody wants me to repeat the question, I'm very happy to. Would you like me to? Yes, I will. So this is from Beth. Our property values are directly linked to the perceived excellence of our schools. How do the candidates react to the statement, in the beginning of the quote, to achieve, maintain, and improve upon excellence, we need to spend more, end quote. Ms. Geddes.
I guess I'd say we need to make a balance. There are times when we will need to spend more, and there's times when we have to look to be more effective and more cost conscious. Taxpayer money shouldn't be left on the table. We should be looking and making every effort as board members to identify what makes that excellence, and for those programs, as a small district, it's quite important to find opportunities such as special education, intra-district cooperation, as well as transportation, and continue to look for opportunities like that where things can be done more cost effectively, and in some cases with more variety than we could do them in our own district. So finding creative ways is critical.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz, would you like me to reread?
Oh, I don't need it. I just got a tickle in my throat, though. The answer is no. Cost isn't translated into a great education. It's not translated into a poor education. It's about doing the most with the money, using it most effectively. This isn't just isolated to schools. When I worked for Citigroup, our budgets were cut. And do more with less, do more with less. We would complain, but somehow we got the job done. And we got it done well. Nobody wants to be cheap with our kids. I don't. We also need to respect that 2/3 of our community support our school district through tax dollars, but don't utilize the schools. We need their support. Without their support, we couldn't pass the school budget. I think that through the Budget Task Force, which was years ago, I think we have tremendous talent in the community that could find ways. We talked about solar panels, transportation option. We did space utilization studies, looked at administration and what jobs
Thank
functions.
you, Ms.
I'm
Lenz.
sorry, I didn't
No,
see
that's
the
okay.
stop.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. And we're back. Yes.
In answering that question to the specific person, I'd have to say it's a balancing act that has to be thought of very carefully. Property values sometimes are considered to be connected directly to the school district you're in, but with the reassessment that we just had in Greenberg, there are a lot of people who saw their taxes skyrocket, and they're looking to sell their homes. If people are constantly trying to sell their homes, the property values are going to go down. By the same token, you don't want to stop spending, but spending money doesn't necessarily guarantee a better education. Without the people and the students working together, with the parents' assistance at home, then you're going to have a failing school system. As long as you have those three things working together, you're going to be successful.
Thank you. Okay. So we have another question. Beth, I'm sure there are many Beths, but this comes from Beth.
No.
No.
Okay, I'm just reading the name. This is for you, correct? That's where we are? Yes. Okay. In the year before the tax cap, In the year before the tax cap levy was to be enforced by the state, this district decided to cut its budget instead of planning ahead to create a more enriched baseline number from which future caps would be calculated. Are any of the candidates willing to say openly that this was a mistake and that our school district needs to actually educate its voters that they need to support our schools with more tax dollars?
Is that my question?
Yes.
Yes.
is educating our voters about the tax dollars that need to be spent in the schools or other ways that the school adds value. I think there's always a great gulf between what is known and what is presumed. And I would say that it is a tough sale, and should I be in the position to make that sale, I will do my utmost to educate the community.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz, do you want me to reread the question?
Yeah, just in case.
Okay. In the year before the tax cap levy was to be enforced by the state, this district decided to cut its budget instead of planning ahead to create a more enriched baseline number from which future caps would be calculated. Are any of the candidates willing to say openly that this was a mistake and that our school district needs to actually educate its voters that they need to support our schools with more tax dollars?
I think we do have a community that supports our schools. I don't necessarily I think that means that we have to spend more, and we don't have to reach the cap. And actually, Beth and I just had this conversation. With the tax cap, it was very interesting because I was wondering about that. Everybody talks about the tax cap and how it's restricting us. So NYSED had some amazing data. So I pulled down the data from NYSED, and I looked at 6 years since the tax cap and 6 years prior to the tax cap. And we've had larger percentage increases the 6 years since the tax cap than the 6 years prior. And we've been pushing for a 5-year plan for the last 10 years. So I think what we need is to look longitudinally and see, well, why? We didn't have a 5-year plan. We could speak anecdotally about why the increases were less the 6 years prior to the tax cap.
Thank you.
But I'm done.
Thank you. I'll move to you, Mr. Dawson. Would you like me to reread the question?
No, I have the question, thank you.
Okay.
Being one of the 5 people who voted to cut the taxes that year, it was a unanimous vote on the board. And it was done because there were many people in the community who were suffering from taxes that were too high. There were many complaints that the spending was just out of line. We had classes that had fewer than 10 students in them. So it came to a situation that we had to do what we thought was best for the community at the time. And to think that you should spend up to the tax limit so that you can get a higher tax the next year is disingenuous to the community that you're serving. We have a financial responsibility to the people who elect us, and that's to do the best for them that we can.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Mr. Friedman, are you?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
No, I think this question also goes back to the prior question, and simply spending more money doesn't necessarily mean you're providing a better education. And one of the things that we as a board would have to do, and as a community, is to look critically at how we allocate our resources and whether we need to allocate more resources to the schools or not, and engage in a dialogue with all of the stakeholders, the administration, the people who have children in the schools, the people who don't have children in the schools, to figure out what the community wants, how to support that, and at what level are people going to be comfortable supporting the schools. I mean, in a perfect world, I think people would love to spend more money on education, but we also live in a society with somewhat finite resources, and we need to make sure we maximize the use of those resources and get the community the best value for those tax dollars.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to stir this up just a little bit, just to see.
Beth, you just want to tell us what your questions were?
It's okay. It's okay. No,
Just put different letters at the end so we
Nope.
pretend.
I'm just drawing. Okay, so this question is Ms. Lenz, yes, right? You're the first. Okay. This question is from Cheryl. How can we best implement an effective recycling program in our schools and on school grounds, and introduce composting of food waste to make sustainability a more central part of our curriculum and practices?
First, we need recycling bins. This has been an issue, and it's been brought up. I think more dialogue needs to be put forward. We need recycling bins outside, better garbage cans to start the initiative. And then we need people like Cheryl that are much more conscientious and much more knowledgeable and pull in our resources from our community. None of us know everything, and people have some great ideas on how to get the job done, and we've had recycling programs in the past that have worked well and brought a community together, but I'm running out of time, so I can't go over that.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Thank you. Recycling is today more important than ever. I mean, we have not done it for so long as well as we should have, that we are at a crisis stage. In my high school in Yonkers, we have an autistic program, and those kids go around once a week, and they are collecting the cans and bottles and the newspaper, and they're bringing them to a different trash container to be removed from the property. It gives them a feeling of doing something. It gives us an understanding that it's important to know what's the difference. And I've taken it one step further and get the kids to make sure that they take water bottles and anything that has a nickel deposit. And those all come to me because I take them to ShopRite or wherever and get the money and send it to St. Libre School for Indian Children in Ashland, Montana. And the kids all know that, and they love the idea.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
No, I think everyone is in favor of trying to be environmentally friendly and recycle. I think none of us have the magic solution in terms of how to get it done, but I think one of the things is we need education. I think if we start at the lower grade levels and teach kids about the importance of recycling, and if we try to start a program where they'll have recycling bins in the schools, if we want to look into composting, that there'll be composting bins available. I mean, I know that at Dow's Lane they now have a garden which is done in partnership with the PTSA, where kids learn about how to garden. It would be great if we could tie in recycling and composting as part of that program and engage with some of our partners in the community to try to help get that program started and get that at the lower level so it just becomes part of everyday school habit and will follow them throughout their entire career.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
Well, I'd like to add on to that the recycling program that Cheryl and some others got started at Dow's Lane is functioning. So bottles, I think it's bottles and cans and paper. Forgive me if I'm inaccurate on any of those, but the fact is there is some recycling being done within some of the schools. But a way to handle this might be to say it can't all come from the schools, but working outside the schools to bring the schools into compliance with something that the village does may be another way to crack this nut. So to say, let's bring the village up and look at what the village can do for initiatives that will then the schools will be able to comply
Thank
with,
you.
so there'll be a common program.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stir this just a little bit better. Okay. Mr. Dawson, are we back to you?
I think we are. Della, you just went, right?
No.
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
No.
I don't think they'll
Oh,
answer.
yeah, I must have.
You just answered.
Yeah, I
You
talked-
just started that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Last.
you went.
Yeah,
if
so
you went
it's
last,
John.
then yes.
You, yes. Okay, okay. Thank you. This is from Kathleen. With the school taxes continually rising, together with the overall property taxes, it is getting less appealing for residents without children and those whose children have already graduated to continue to live in Irvington. How will you balance the interests of this group while still providing challenging academic programs?
As I said before, the 3 years that I was on the school board, we had a virtual flat increase in the budget from 2009 to 2012. We did not have students suddenly not getting into all of the schools that they were getting into before. And matter of fact, they rose to the occasion and did very well. But we do have to start paying a lot more attention to those residents. The taxes that we're facing in Westchester, but especially in Irvington, are not something you can just say, oh, well, just increase the budget. You can't. You have to really take into consideration the problems that some people are having in paying their budgets and in paying their taxes. The state has done some things with the STAR program, but not enough. We have veterans who get benefits because of the village of Irvington and the town of Greenburgh. That's not enough for some of these people. They need even more help, and we have to be aware of that.
Thank you. Mr. Fried, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. With the school taxes continually rising, together with the overall property taxes, it is getting less appealing for residents without children and those whose children have already graduated to continue to live in Irvington. How will you balance the interests of this group while still providing challenging academic programs?
I think this is a common theme, through a lot of these questions. Unfortunately, taxes here are high. That's not a secret. They've been high back when I was a student here 30 years ago. And it's an unfortunate reality that just goes into the cost of living. I think, though, the budgets over the last several years have had very modest increases. They've been within the tax cap for the most part. And as a community, we have to continue every year to look critically at what the budget looks like, what we need to spend to maintain the quality of education, but to try to do that, again, in the most cost-effective way to minimize the amount of increase in the tax levy. And we also have to be creative and look for ways to increase state funding, federal funding, any other things that can be used to mitigate the tax burden on the residents here for those who have kids and those who don't.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
So in my work with the PTSA Legislative Strategic Advisory Committee, we looked at the problem of the cost of living in Westchester and the way that it seemed to unfairly fall on certain districts not to get the foundation aid that they were entitled to from the state of New York, and that's still the case. While it is certainly not a board member's primary role to do that kind of advocacy, I think what we need to do as a community is educate ourselves about what we're getting in comparison to other school districts, and find ways, such as with WestPUT, to work together to look for ways to better reach the lawmakers who are making these decisions.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz?
Take this in three parts. First, we need a community that invests for the long term. I moved here before I had kids. I want to stay here after I have kids. Also, another thing to consider is, how do the taxes affect your property values? The higher your taxes, the lower your property value, just when you're doing a calculation and buying your home. If you have to pay more in taxes, your budget for a mortgage that's all taken into consideration. Maybe that's not an issue for everybody, but is it an issue for some? Also looking at, we have the same number of students today as we had in 2000. How many, I think that we need to look at and have a plan on looking at what is the enrollment going to be, how many people have moved into the district. Our maximum number of students coming in has been 1,900. This graduating class, or 1998. This graduating class had the highest, our last class of the largest classes, and now it's dropping off.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Friedman, correct? Yes, okay. This question is from David. If 3 kids get concussions during football season, will that be enough for you to support ending funding for football? This saving the district thousands of dollars that can be rebated to taxpayers and potentially millions more in liability. If not 3, how many? 5? 10?
Interesting. I guess you just watched the movie Concussion the other day, so I guess this is appropriate. Look, this is a conversation that's happening in a lot of towns, and in terms of football and other sports, where people are just much more aware now about concussions and the risks. I don't think there is a number of concussions at which point you end the football program. I think that is a discussion we need to have with the community about, do people want to continue to have a football program? It's a much more complex decision. I don't think you just put a number on concussions and say we're going to stop the football program. We may come to a point in time where we don't have enough kids participating in football because of these issues to maintain a football program. We may need to look into an alternative football program at some point where we need to merge with another school. So this is part of, I think, a much larger and longer conversation about football that's going on in communities all across the county.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
I agree that the question of concussion-type injuries in athletics is an important one to have, and clearly it relates to a district's liability as well as how we're allocating our dollars to athletics. I think it's important, and particularly here in Irvington, where there are traditions that the community that mean a lot to the school community and to those who live here, to bring the community into it. We are always so without finding ways to constructively engage the community in this decision making, I don't see how it would be viable to end the football program, although the fact is the statistics on the effects of concussions are frightening.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz?
My first question would be why? Why are kids getting more concussions at Irvington than in other schools? Are we providing the right tools? Are we providing the right equipment? Are the helmets adequate? I think that a lot of discussion and community involvement, and we're very, very fortunate. We have a lot of free resources and a lot of community members that donate their time. We have Mark Hersig, and his expertise has been invaluable. We need to reach out to the community and utilize what they know best and have them help us make the right decisions for our kids. Wow, I stopped early.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Okay. On the issue of concussions, Irvington has been one of the leaders in Westchester County in all of Section 1. We started testing students, giving them a pretest before they started the sport, long before anybody else did, so that if they were to get a concussion, we knew what the timeline was going to be based on the results of a doctor's examination. I agree with Della that if you start to see lots of concussions, it's not a question of, oh, we have to drop the sport. It's why are the concussions happening? Because concussions can happen in any one of our sports. We had a young lady playing basketball a few years back who was pushed, slid into the bleachers, got a concussion. It happens. We had a girl in field hockey get a concussion. Football just gets more publicity for the concussions because of the movie that Brian alluded to. I'm not saying, and it goes back to if we have the number of students,
Thank you, Mr. Dawson.
then it's a different story.
Okay, so we're back to, yes, Ms. Geddes. This question comes from Steve. The cost of providing a quality education in Irvington is a significant driver of property taxes. There are few endeavors or institutions where every dollar spent or is spent as efficiently and effectively as possible. If you were elected and circumstances required budget cuts of 5%, and this is a hypothetical case, where would you first look for savings?
I would first look for savings in those places that don't impact the teaching of our kids. So I would have to look, as has been done before, in pushing back maintenance schedules and in doing the things that aren't going to impact education directly.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Lenz, would you like me to repeat the question? Or?
No.
Okay.
I guess what I would like to see is more proactive. Like I said, we've been talking about a 5-year plan for about 10 years. The board has been working diligently on starting that and really driving to make that happen. But you don't want to be reactionary. I'm an advocate of having the most resources to the kids, but if we had a 5-year plan, we could see where the money is allocated. We can know in advance, is it administration that we look at? Is it maintenance, but we have to pay for maintenance at some point? We don't want to have another bond and force that on taxpayers for future problems. But I think it comes from a 10-year plan, 5-year plan, and being proactive.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dawson, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. The cost of providing a quality education in Irvington is a significant driver of property taxes. There are few endeavors or institutions where every dollar is spent as efficiently and effectively as possible. If you were elected and circumstances required budget cuts of 5%, which is a hypothetical case, where would you first look for savings?
5% is a huge cut in our budget. Okay, we're talking millions. There's no safe way. Okay? In a realistic situation, I can tell you that we had to cut and keep taxes down when I was on the board. We had the teachers union give back, I think it was 2 days or a day and a half of their salary to help try and lower the costs. I tried to get in touch with Mechanical Hills, okay, to try and get them, if they are a K-8 school district, so their high school students can go to any one of several schools. I tried to get that tuition to come here. It wasn't followed through on. Finding other ways of getting revenue is a lot easier than cutting, because you're cutting programs that hurt kids, and that's never anything anybody wants to do.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
You know, as Mr. Dawson said, 5% would be a very large number. That would be significant cuts. And I think before you look to cut, obviously programs, we need to look at can we save money in other ways by sharing services? Can we build on what we've done with the other districts in the area to further reduce our costs for the services that we all share? You know, we try that with busing. Can that be expanded elsewhere? What else can we do to increase revenue in the district to offset that? I know, this year one of the things in the budget was a program to keep more of our special education students in district, to put in a program that would ultimately save the district substantial amounts of money. So we need to look at those types of solutions first and be creative about how we can spend our money, increase our revenue from other sources to try to minimize actually cutting programs.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz, this is for you, yes? So I have another question from Beth.
Different Beth.
That's all right.
I'm asking, okay, all right, we're drawing them as we go. How do you see the role of a school board member? How do you see the role of the school board? Do you think the school board should be involved with the day-to-day running of our schools?
School board members set the vision. They set the goals, driven by the community. And we need communication and transparency and involvement from our community to set those goals, for boards to know what the community wants. Does a board get involved in the day-to-day activities? Absolutely not. But they do set the goals, both short-term and long-term, for the school, and they expect the schools to reach. And they have measurable goals, and the goals should be measurable. I'm very impressed with the school board. They've really been focusing on having measurable goals and deliverables for accountability, and it's been going very well. I think we need more of that. And, okay, 15 seconds. I'm sorry, I lost track now. No to the everyday, but when asked, we need to be able to, we have to have communication within our district. We have to communicate with the teachers to validate whether those goals are actually being completed.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson, would you like me to read? No.
No, that's okay. The responsibility of a school board member has nothing to do with day-to-day operations under New York state law. That is the superintendent's domain. However, that being said, it is the board's responsibility to evaluate the superintendent. If the school board is disagreeing with the way that a superintendent is handling day-to-day operations, then they have a right to let them know through the evaluation process. But to intervene themselves is inappropriate. Their job is to establish policy, to make sure procedures are in place, to set the vision, to listen to the superintendent, but not be under the control of a superintendent. It's to let their own views and feelings come through about what is best for the district, because that's what you people elect us for.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
So I think, as everyone said, the board should not be getting involved in the day-to-day running of the school. That's why we have superintendents, principals, and other professionals that we hire and depend on. What the board should be involved in is, as people have said, setting the goals and the vision for the district. And to do that, the board has to listen to the community, understand what the community wants. One of the things that's been talked about is early foreign language. Is that something that we want to have as one of our goals in the long term to provide in the schools? So the board needs to be responsive to what the community wants, and then also work with the administration to figure out how do we achieve those goals. What's the best way to meet those goals from both a resource standpoint and to deliver the program most effectively. And then the board has to sit back and look at, are those goals being met? Setting goals is great, but if the goals aren't being achieved, that doesn't do anyone good. So the board has to have a level of accountability to make sure that the goals it sets are actually achieved.
Thank you.
So my understanding, like what's been said, is that the board should not be involved in the day-to-day running of the schools. When the board's energy should be spent on setting policies, planning, which I assume has to do with the way the policies will be rolled out, and then assessment. So that is assessment of the job that the executive, in this case, the superintendent, is doing. So in a healthy relationship between the board and the district, I think it's possible to give feedback and to gain information about what's happening day to day in the schools in a way that's constructive. And it's quite important that even when disagreeing with what's happening in the administration, that it be done in a mutually respectful way. It's an important relationship.
Thank you. So we're moving to you, Mr. Dawson. Yes?
Can I hear the question again?
You get to hear it first. This is a question from Beth. And I am
Thank God you put the questions in.
The candidates should know that the state's failure to provide funding for expanded wireless access in MSS had led to a situation where one class on each grade has a much more enriched educational experience in terms of technologically enhanced access and global learning opportunities than other classes on each grade, 4 and 5 in parentheses. In light of the situation, if the state won't provide the funding, what would the candidate suggest to provide equal wireless access to all classrooms on both grades immediately?
I'm not quite sure where the question's going, because the district is responsible for everything ultimately that happens in all the schools. So it's the district's responsibility to make things equitable. You can't have one school having something and another school not having something and blame the state. The state gives us the money to decide where it should be spent equitably for the way the programs are dealt out. It's possible that maybe there was a grant from the IEF that enabled one school to get a little something extra because they put in for it and received it. But in terms of money coming from the state, it's the district's responsible for sharing that in the way that the district has planned out the way it should be. So any inequities fall on our feet.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman, would you like me to reread the
Please.
question? Okay. The candidates should know that the state's failure to provide funding for expanded wireless access in MSS had led to a situation where one class on each grade has a much more enriched educational experience in terms of technologically enhanced access and global learning opportunities than other classes on each grade, and in parentheses 4 and 5. In light of the situation, if the state won't provide the funding, what would the candidate suggest to provide equal wireless access to all classrooms on both grades immediately?
Well, I think the first issue is, we need to obviously figure out from the state level why those funds haven't been allocated, and if there's an issue with either our application or something, obviously try to resolve that. Assuming that the state money is not going to materialize, we then as a district need to look at what is the cost to have wireless access throughout the school, which I think everyone would agree would be a good thing. And then the question is it something that as a district we can spend money on, or can we also look to see whether there is any sort of private communication company that could provide the service in exchange for other services throughout the village? So you need to look at it like that. I think there's also the issue of trying to make sure that everyone has an equal educational experience, but that would go on much more than the minute I'm allowed.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
While I think it's a great thing when everyone can have exactly the same educational experience within a grade level, I have to start by asking if an immediate change is really the best one in this case. So obviously the district made a decision to equip parts of each grade in order to increase technology in the classroom for a reason. I know that if this technology improvements are made without waiting for state funding, we don't get that refunded from the state. So it seems as if this is a case where it's a wait and see and say immediate exact equity may not always be the best resolution.
Thank you. Ms. Lenz?
I guess my first question would be why? The wireless access takes time to put in, it's planned, it's budgeted, so we know about that. We know about where it's going to be put in. So my question would be, why were we limiting access? And if it was necessity out of cost and reimbursement and everything, my next question would be, what proactive measures did we take to give the tools to the teachers without the wireless access to provide an equitable education without the wireless access? We've done it for years without wireless access. Talk to the teachers, talk to the school, work with them, and provide them with the tools that they need. The curriculum is the same. It's getting the tools to the teachers.
Thank you. And I'm moving to Mr. Friedman, correct? Yes, okay. This is a question from Scott. There are parts of Irvington where students do not qualify for busing, but the condition, size, and proximity to main roads of our sidewalks makes walking to school extremely dangerous. Prior alternatives offered by the district have included such options as trespassing on privately held property or walking on the isolated aqueduct, which is often covered in ice and snow during the school year. These are obviously not acceptable. Do you have any thoughts on how we might address this issue?
Yes. Look, I think the first thing is to look at the busing that we currently have, and is it being fully utilized? I mean, I see buses that don't appear to be at capacity. So if our buses aren't at capacity, can those buses be used to transport some of those students without increasing route times or leading to other costs? I know the middle school bus stops right outside my street. That can be a drop-off point for maybe multiple students who can get on the bus at that point. The bus is right on Broadway. It's not going out of its way. So I think we need to look at the ridership, the routes, and are there ways that we can serve those students without having them walk in dangerous conditions. I think walking in the winter here is a challenge, and we need to find a better way to do that. Hopefully also the traffic improvements they've been talking about on Route 9 to make the community a better walking community would alleviate some of those issues as well.
Thank you.
So I would add that what's being done to create a traffic plan for Broadway currently is quite important to the folks, kids who have to walk to school and those who are inside of that limit of about 1.5 miles, I guess, that need to walk to school once they get to middle school. It's not, we obviously, with what we're spending on buses now, we have to look very carefully. I know that there's money in the budget right now to look at how to better utilize the high school busing situation, but every time it seems like we need to be looking more flexibly, as Brian has said as well, at solutions that maybe aren't one size fits all. And
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Lenz?
I think what is currently happening with the traffic plan and the sidewalks and all the other initiatives that's going on will help with that issue. The walking school bus has, well, I know for the younger kids, not necessarily mine, I just sent them off. That's been very beneficial. The Budget Task Force did look at capacity. And one thing that people have to keep in mind is, one of the first things when times get tough is transportation. And thankfully, the transportation distances weren't affected because there was a community pushback that we wanted the safety for our kids. We do have to look at capacity and being flexible. If one side of the street is getting picked up and the other side isn't, what's the big deal? And to be honest with you, I think most bus drivers just let the kids on the bus. They just say walk across the street and they go on. We do have the flexibility, and I think we just need to continue it and be creative.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question? Yes, of course. There are parts of Irvington where students do not qualify for busing, but the condition, size, and proximity to main roads of our sidewalks makes walking to school extremely dangerous. Prior alternatives offered by the district have included such options as trespassing on privately held property or walking on the isolated aqueduct, which is often covered in ice and snow during the school year. These are obviously not acceptable. Do you have any thoughts on how we might address this issue?
Well, I can tell you, when we kept talking about reducing the budget, as we've heard from the other people up here, that's a major expense, so that's always looked at first. And invariably what we found out was that no matter how few students are riding a bus, you have to send the bus based on the number of possible students that are sent on. So it becomes a very complicated issue in terms of how to make these buses fuller than what they are. At one point, we talked about trying to get rid of busing altogether, but you can't because you have the east side of Broadway has no sidewalks. Using the aqueduct is fine, but you don't have to because there is a sidewalk on that side that is supposed to be maintained in case of snow by village ordinance. It's a complicated issue, and it's one that is constantly being looked at by every school board.
Thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions. And we're moving to Ms. Geddes. Yes, Ms. Geddes. This is a question from Beth. Can the candidates briefly comment on their understanding of how unfunded mandates, tax cap levy calculation, and foundation aid make budgeting for school districts more difficult? Can they explain their ideas for working around state-influenced limits on funding?
Can you repeat the entire question, please? Thank you.
Can the candidates briefly comment on their understanding of how unfunded mandates, tax cap levy calculation, and foundation aid make budgeting for school districts more difficult? Can they explain their ideas for working around state influence limits on funding?
So the first part of the question, foundation aid, is something that the state is a number that the state decides on for Irvington and sets every year in the budget. It's not an easy, so it's not something that we influence directly without additional advocacy. Unfunded mandates are the what the state asks us to provide to students, to teachers, which it isn't providing us any additional money for. Between that and the tax cap, you're looking at things that the state is asking us to do without funding, not giving us foundation aid necessarily at the levels that other districts get. And
Thank you.
it's a longer answer than I can certainly give now.
Ms. Lenz?
Optimism, I try to always keep an optimistic eye. We are much more fortunate than other districts. We have a community that does have the resources, and we are committed to put those resources into the school. That makes us very fortunate than other school districts around us. So even though they get a little bit more foundation aid, and we would want that money, we're still better off. The unfunded mandates, it's creativity. The board members know now. It's trying to find the best ways to utilize the money. The tax levy, 2% is not 2%. Some years 2% is 4%. Some years 2% is 1.5%. So that's always difficult to calculate. The board works diligently to find the most effective use of the tax dollars, whether it's funded, unfunded, tax dollars from the state, from the Fed. It's our responsibility to know how much we need and how much to allocate. Sorry.
Can you just repeat the 3 things that they were looking at? The tax,
Yes.
unfunded?
Unfunded mandates, tax cap levy calculation, and foundation aid.
Okay. All right. And actually, it's better today than it was 6 years ago. The state, starting in 2008, 2009, was actually taking money away from school districts that it had said it was going to give them. Irvington gets very little money in state aid in relationship to most other school districts in Allen. I jokingly said one night that we should secede from the state, let them keep their tax revenue, because then we wouldn't have to do the unfunded mandates, and we'd be ahead $3 million. What we did do, and what Mr. Hanna, I'm sure, is doing as the representative to the Westchester County School Board Association, is use lobbying groups to try and get the legislature to change things. And that has happened. We've gotten money back that had been taken away. As part of the School Board Association Alumni Organization, I also have written letters to do the same thing, talk to people in
Okay,
education.
Mr. Dawson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Yeah, look, I think we all recognize that unfunded mandates, the tax cap, and the amount of foundation aid all go into the budgetary calculation. It all provides an added complexity and things that the board needs to deal with. I don't think any of us could describe that adequately in a minute. But what I did want to talk about is where John was going as well, which is as a county, we need to continue those lobbying efforts to increase the amount of state aid that Westchester gets. If you look at the amount of aid Westchester gets relative to Long Island, another similar community, it's, my understanding, widely disparate, and that shouldn't be the case. Our funding should be much more on par with those districts out there, and we as a community and really as a county need to step up our lobbying efforts to equalize that playing field.
Thank you. So this will be our last question.
Beth.
It's from Beth.
This question is from Tanya, and this is directed to Ms. Lenz. You're the...
I think it's a pseudonym.
Are you ready for the question?
Sure.
What do you consider to be the 3 most important characteristics of a Board of Education member, and why?
Somebody that has good communication skills, reaches out to the community, reaches out to all the stakeholders, the teachers, works collaboratively with the other board members. Communication, everybody uses the buzzword communication. It sounds great, but communication is hard. I would love to tell my teenage kids what to do, but I have to actually listen to them. It's about consensus building. Doesn't mean that it's a bunch of like-minded individuals that are imposing that decision on the entire community. Consensus building means seeking out a diverse thought, seeking out information, learning from each other to make things better. And it's taking all that information, all that knowledge, and trying to make it acceptable for our entire community and feeling like we're a community.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
First, a board member has to have a vision for where he or she wants to see the district going, whether it's 1 year or 3 years, because that's all our terms are for. 5 years, hey, if you're going to get elected to the second time, go for it. The second thing that you have to do is be able to listen to your fellow board members and hear what they have to say about their visions and see where you can find common ground to move things forward. Because if you just try to keep pushing your viewpoint and don't listen to anybody, nothing gets done and the children don't get what they deserve.
Mr. Friedman?
So I think the 3 characteristics that I would point to is, first, you have to be a good listener. And that means listening to your fellow board members, means listening to the community for what they're looking for out of the school district, and also listening to the administrators and other professionals in the district in terms of what are their needs and what are their concerns and how we can best try to harmonize all of those different ideas. You have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to consider ideas that aren't your own, that may come elsewhere, that maybe you didn't support initially, but that may turn out to be the best idea. And I think at the end of the day, you have to think critically and be a problem solver. You have to get a lot of information, you have to synthesize it, you have to decide whether what you're hearing makes sense, and if not, ask questions. You have to be able to look at how we allocate our resources with a critical eye to make sure that it's being done the most effective way. I'd say those are some of the 3 most important characteristics.
Thank you. Ms. Geddes?
As we've now passed the 9:30 mark, I'd agree that listening, preparation, analysis, and synthesis as a part of that, of the analysis and synthesis of the information, and so maintaining mutual respect. So both with the folks who elect us, our community, with the administration, and of course with other board members. So again, not dividing the community in the effort to achieve our visions is quite essential.
Thank you.
So this brings our panel discussion to an end. Thank you all for coming, and thank you very much to Lynn Levine and Jody Reaver for coming and asking the questions. Thank you to Beth for asking so many of our great questions.
And her husband, one of them, it didn't have Beth's name, but.
We did get about 26 questions, so a lot of other questions are in the sandbox. And of course, thank you to the candidates for coming out and putting themselves through this tonight. We really appreciate it. Good luck to you all, and we look forward to the results of the election on July 11th, 2 weeks from today. Please go and vote. Thank you very much. Have a good night and a great summer.
Thank you.